of the council who are present in the room. I'll go around and recognize them first as members of the committee, as well as our city staff and our clerk. We're also being joined by at least one member. Now I see two representative town meeting members of Brookline, and perhaps others will join later. And I see that we've been joined by the town administrator, Mr. Terry.
Yeah.
So I'll recognize everybody as we go by, but I just want to welcome all of you to this meeting of the committee. And let me go around and introduce the members of the committee here. First to my left is the vice chair, Councilor Wright from Ward 3. Next to her is the president of the council, John Oliver from Ward 1. Next to him rather, is Serena Guest, who is the board councilor from Ward 5. Councilor Large, excuse me, not Ward, councilor. And then over to my right is Katie Wewell, who is the acting director of planning, and Councilor Gordon, Lisa Gordon from Ward 6. We're joined by Councilor Albright from Ward 2, and Councilor Donovan from Ward 4. And then online, we've been joined by, I think, Councilor Block, and then who's not a member of the committee and also not a member of the committee, but in the room. Councilor Roach, sorry. And let's see if we got anybody else from, and in the room we have Councilor Janice Khan, who's not councilor, but town meeting member Janice Khan, and online, as I mentioned, I believe Councilor let's see all the Sean, you showed me how to do this if I had my computer, but I don't have it.
No, Miles needs to do it. She's just trying to see
Who's here?
who
I
the
want to make
presenters
sure.
is.
Councilor,
Make sure you
excuse
cover
me,
all
town
the
meeting.
councilors
Thank you.
and town meeting.
Okay, so the purpose of this meeting, and I'll read the item into the record, the first item on discussion, and I will chair this section of the meeting, and then I'll turn over the second part of the meeting to the vice chair, is 9926, requesting the presentation and discussion of the proposed town of Brookline rezoning on Route 9 Boylston Street between Hammond Street and Hammond Pond Parkway. Specifically, Councilors Baker, Grossman, Felix, Farrell, Golden, Silver, Thomabed, Lucas, Albright, Maliki, Wright, Getz, and Block, requesting a presentation and discussion about the proposed road zoning and related traffic modifications under consideration by the town of Brookline for the Boylston Street Route 9 corridor between Hammond Street and Hammond Pond Parkway, abutting the city of Newton. As I mentioned in the cover memo to this attached to the packet, I was part of a conversation in the mayor's office, and the town administrator was there with two of his colleagues, so I very much appreciated having the opportunity to hear from. And I felt it was important that the council have similar information before it, so that you can understand the potential impacts on the city. And to the extent that there are information that would be helpful to Brookline in making this decision, we might offer those or questions that come up that might be important for them to know. This is a matter that is really of importance to the city as a whole, in my judgment, because Route 9 is one of the four major east-west corridors that goes through the city, and what happens in the Newton part affects Brookline, and what happens in Brookline affects Newton. And so it's important to at least understand what is going on. I want to make clear that Brookline has the capacity and the right and the opportunity to do what it wants with its own zoning scheme. We don't have any role in that formula. All we can have is just an opportunity to make sure that our citizens are informed, and that we can in turn inform the Brookline officials if they want to take advantage of any of the points of view that we have. I will just say, in a historical perspective, I don't know if Councilor Albright was on the council, but when we rezoned the Star Market, you remember that a long time ago? We did that, and we had comments from Brookline at the time. We were thinking about what happens with that not rezoned. We had a big special permit which allowed the market to be reconstructed, and then the parking spaces set aside for it. And then also more recently, Chestnut Hill Square, you may remember, was the redevelopment that involved Wegmans. And one of the important decisions that the council made, in part from input from Brookline, was to make sure that all the access to the site was from Route 9, not through Florence Street, because of the potential adverse effect on the residents there, both in Newton and in Brookline. So there's been a history of cooperation between the communities, even though it's been informal and not anything formal. So I hope that practice would continue in this context. But as a way of providing background, there's a whole presentation that the memo indicated that the town had put together for design considerations. There's also a traffic study that has been done. What I did was pull out with consultations with the planning department, the slides that are attached to the agenda that I thought were the most relevant to at least set the stage for Newton. And then what I would do is we would go through those as we will.
I can write in the chat that we're coming back online.
It's still running, it's just we.
Hello,
No,
we're having
yeah.
some technical
Wow.
challenges in the room, but we'll be
Just
back
pick up-
online momentarily.
What about the word "and"?
We were joined by the vice president, who was useful as always.
That would help.
But recording in progress. Not good on their own.
Okay, all right,
Trying to turn this out.
all right.
No.
Okay, am I good? That we were talking about, there's a traditional cooperation between the communities. We worked there with Brookline when we did the Chestnut Hill Square development, also and the time of Star Market redevelopment. And the pattern in Newton, for those of you who are watching from Brookline, has been generally to do a rezoning coupled with special permits. A very rare event when we don't do that. But Brookline is considering something which is a major rezoning for the Route 9 corridor. And I'm going to ask Ms. Wewell to take us through that. And then Mr. Starkey will take us through the traffic slides, and then we'll open it up for comment. But it's not a public hearing. I will recognize the public officials who are here from Brookline or online who want to offer comments or can respond to questions so that we could get a sense of this. My intent is that at the conclusion of this, we hold the item so that we can stay abreast of this, because it's a project that or a proposal that will go through the process in Brookline and be completed, we understand, sometime in May or early June. So Ms. Wewell, can you just take us through and show us a little bit of the context?
Yes, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. So my colleague Nora Colello is going to share the slides while I speak to them, so less multitasking on my part. At the request of the council, staff have taken a cursory look at the proposed zoning overlay districts along Route 9 in the town of Brookline. Staff recognize the proximity of this proposed zoning to neighborhoods in Ward 7 and 8, and are therefore sharing the most relevant information from Brookline's materials. So I think we just lost the.
I know, it just was looking at it, so you're,
Oh, were you talking over that same presentation that I
Yeah.
had to share? Oh, pardon.
Nora was
sorry, I actually didn't write it. So Miles is
sharing.
shared.
For
Yeah.
for those of you who first visit the zoning planning committee tonight, this is you know, growing pains technology. That's all right. Yeah, daylight saving time. Blame it on the clock.
So my colleague Miles will be helping me. Thank you, Miles. You can go to the next slide. So the site context, so this commercial area study consists of 27.8 acres over roughly 6 blocks along Route 9. 5 blocks are located south of Route 9, and 1 of those is north of Route 9. The northeastern portion of the study area is within a 5-minute walk of the Chestnut Hill T station along Hammond Street. Next slide. There are 4 overlay subzones that are pictured here. So there's the Chestnut Hill Commercial 4.0 zone, the CHC 3.0 zone, neighborhood mixed use as well as the transit oriented mixed use. So, next slide. So the Chestnut Hill Commercial Overlay District allows for the greatest height in the Western House Sub-District and generally tapers down toward the eastern extent. You can see the areas that allow the highest building height is concentrated in that 4.0 district on either side of Tully Street with maximum heights of 150 feet to 175 feet. And next slide. A zoning envelope is a 3-dimensional space within which a building must fit. So that's shown on this slide. The zoning envelope is determined by the combination of requirements, including ground level setbacks, upper level step backs, the maximum building heights, and bonus building heights where applicable. It is important to note that the zoning envelope represents more potential gross building area than is permitted. So it's sort of that form that it can take. So shown here is the envelope based on the corresponding overlay district. So I think that concludes that zoning overview that the town of Brookline, has in their presentation. And I think as the chair noted, the Brookline Town Administrator, Charles Carey, is here to speak on behalf of the town of Brookline.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So let's just go through the other part quickly. It's important to understand that the town had engaged, as I understand it, a traffic consultant to prepare some possible responses to the traffic situation in the area, not all of which are dependent on the development. So I think it's important to understand that. And they require, in the case of Route 9, because it's a state highway, the concurrence of the state. Other matters within the town itself can be done by the town, but they set a context because a number of parts of Newton, but the area that's under study, I thought it was important for us to see at least some of these parts of the transportation study. So I asked Mr. Starkey to just propose slide.
Sorry, I need to.
We're being zoomed out.
Yay.
First,
Okay, we had to be zoomed out. Oh, yeah.
Can you block them, right?
You can, but just-
I tell you, let's close the Zoom and read.
And this is kind of like.
Well, we do know who no presence is.
We did.
Oh,
we did?
sorry.
We did. Mr. Carey, I
Mr.
welcome you to
Oh,
Newton.
it's,
You don't normally have
okay.
extra visual effects.
I've seen it before. We
It's
know,
okay.
we just don't know.
Okay.
Okay.
Right. Miles, are you ready to show us something, or do we need to clear the deck?
Well, the slide is ready for you.
All right, let's try to watch the slide.
Okay, but, okay.
So the purpose of the transportation study is important. This was just to try to evaluate the project, improve safety, incorporate pedestrians and cyclists. Go back to second, Miles.
Same slide, I was just adjusting this so we don't see the
Oh, okay.
bummer.
All right. And incorporate the pedestrians and cyclists, and improve traffic operations that fit within the site constraints. And there's some different alternatives, and I think it's important to just understand these are alternatives. They're not decided by anybody yet, but they're part of the package of considerations that the town at least has to be evaluated. So carry on, Miles. Go to the next one. So this is one of the modifications would be to try and improve the signalization of Route 9. I should just say parenthetically that a number of years past, Route 9 intersection used to be straight east-west, north-south at the same time. And it was modified a number of years ago. So it's east-west with left turn lanes as part of that. But the northbound route is single and the southbound route is single. So in other words, if you're going north, you don't have to try and fight opposing traffic. And that has really made a positive difference in my experience with this site. And I go through it a lot. I actually, before this modification was made, I saw a conflict between motorists where one guy got out of the car and actually punched somebody through the window of another car because of the conflict. So this is an improved situation by a significant amount. Anyway, keep going. And this is just a summary of the anticipated benefits of improving operational efficiency, relatively low cost. The concern is, does it mitigate the traffic on Hammond Street? And it has limitations for bicycles and pedestrians. So the next slide is a potential opportunity for the town that's considering, and this is called the R-Cut. And it takes take a look at it. It's a little hard to see, but the yellow lines indicate that the traffic movement going north and south would be modified so that you couldn't go south directly across Hammond Street. You would have to turn right, make a U-turn down by the FedEx building and come back and then turn right. And if you were going northbound, you would go north. It would be a new loop down by Dunster Road, and you would come back and go north after making that U-turn. So and then the advantages for that particular is that it's reduces the conflict points, it's better for pedestrians. The potential challenges required out of direction travel for some minor street movements. This is an issue that was considerable concern to members of the Ward 8 and Ward 7 councilors, and we sent a letter to the select people of the select board, just indicating concern about that, as well as the inclusion of the Star Market parking area as part of district the rezoning concept. And I have copies of that for you. We'll make that part of the report. So going to the next is the other is Hammond Pond Parkway and Heath Street with a roundabout. And this is a potential opportunity to narrow that roundabout to one lane, as I understand. And again, the thought here is that that would improve the flow of traffic, and also the question of how all of this works obviously has to be worked out. This is not within the state's jurisdiction, as I understand it. This is something that Brookline could do on its own. DCR. DCR, Department of Conservation and Recreation. Okay, carry on. Hang on a minute. Anyway, the point is that they will go through this with the coordination with the city of Newton, as the traffic planners indicated, DCR and Mass DOT. And then there are various, I don't think the Transportation Board in Brookline has passed on this yet. And then there are other things that have to happen, but it's all part of the mitigation possibility of this particular, for this particular development. So that's sort of the basics. And what I want to do is open the committees up to conversation and questions if you have any about other aspects or this aspect. And we also have the town administrator who can respond, and I can also ask for comments from the town. Councilor Kaler.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Carey, for being here and for the presentation. That was great. The R-Cut is something, I'm a Ward 8 councilor, and the R-Cut is something that is really concerning, actually, because often you have, already you have cars queuing to do U-turns, and it gets into the main traffic, and then you have backups on Route 9 that just go on forever. So I'm concerned about the R cuts, and I'm wondering what the test and learn kind of scenario could be to understand if that actually works. You know, it's interesting because when that whole Wegmans shopping area went in, we added a lane where the state had to add a lane, and everybody was questioning whether that would work. Well, I think it's worked pretty well. The R cut could be the same thing, but looking at it, I'm very suspect, and I just like to hear more of and if there's any background from what the your studies have shown, I'd love to see that if you could. But if you could comment on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Thank you, Counselor. And thank you to the chair for inviting me and the whole planning team in Newton. I just want to thank everyone for your time, for your efforts in this. We really want to be good collaborators here. And so it's great to have the opportunity to speak with you. You're not alone in this concern about the R cut, right? When people see that on a map, when they see the overhead, they go, well, it doesn't make any sense to me. It doesn't make any intuitive sense. Why would we do that? It seems to add a step. It seems to, it seems to, invite the sort of potentially dangerous crossing across traffic. There are a lot of concerns that just inherently arise from it. What I would say is the consultant is looking at those dedicated U-turn lanes a little further out from the intersection to try and defray that issue that you're talking about, where traffic piles up at the intersection anyway to try and make that U-turn. So the goal there is to separate that function out a little bit. That's my understanding. But the other thing I'll say about this is one potential solution that the consultant that we brought in identified. Ultimately, the people who make a decision about this are the state. And the state is not going to make a decision about this without Brookline and Newton being on the same page and getting consensus on this, which is why we want to work collaboratively with you to make this happen. So, we're at this point now where we're talking about the zoning, we're talking about the design. We know that there are downstream impacts of traffic on rezoning. We know we want to mitigate those as best we can. We also want to be deliberate in moving this process forward. I mean, the other thing that I noticed when I look at that map above, the bird's eye view of that area is you can clearly tell where the Newton border ends and the Brookline begins because Newton is developed and Brookline isn't. We are underdeveloped in that area, and it is one of the last major areas where Brookline could see meaningful commercial growth in a way that would have a significant impact on the tax rolls. With that said, Brookline is trying to do two things at once here. It's trying to both develop a long-range strategy for that entire neighborhood. So there are rezoning efforts there that are not attached to a particular developer, but have a long-range goal in mind. And then during the course of trying to develop that, the committee was approached by a developer who was interested in the parcel closest to Newton there on the back there, City Realty, on the south side of Route 9. And concurrently with that those broader questions about how do we want that neighborhood to look, how do we want it to develop, there were these specific questions about what could go in there, how could we go through that process. And, it's my understanding in working through that the committee that was set up for that to reevaluate that area and the developer went back and forth several times. The developer came in with a 20-story proposal. Brookline said, absolutely not. It's been back and forth several times now. And each time we've been trying to make clear to the developer, but also the broader community, because it's not just about those parcels and that developer's future, that it has to be well integrated, not just on the Brookline side of the border, but the Newton side of the border. And so, one of the things that we responded to in terms of community requests, not just the lowering of height, but for example, making sure that there's no exit into the neighborhood there, making sure that there's, that we're doing the traffic mitigation, that we're asking for funds for our DPW to do work on our side in terms of landscaping and maintenance of sidewalks and roadways. So there's a lot going on here. But I think the big takeaway is the R-cut idea is an idea at this stage. It is one that I think it's worth thinking about, even though it elicits that strong reaction on paper. But it's also something that's not going to happen without the state say so, and the state is not going to say yes unless both Brookline and Newton have an understanding together. This is what we want, and it's going to be beneficial for both of our communities.
Okay, I appreciate that. I just have one follow-up, if I might, Chair.
Yes, we can.
And it's not on the R-Cut, but can you just give us a perspective with all the development there that you're zoning for? How much of it is commercial and how much of it is residential? I much prefer residential. I know that you prefer commercial, but
Right.
this would be great because, and then also with that, are you also building in alternative modes of travel, or are you requiring that as part of this new area, meaning shuttles or bikes or things like that?
So I'm not currently well versed enough on the alternate means of travel to kind of talk through those in detail, but I can ask the planning department on our end to follow up on how that process has been going. I will say that when it comes to commercial and residential, right, Town of Brookline is not the city of Newton in terms of the balance between commercial and residential. We're in desperate need of advancing our commercial tax base, but not all of this is zoned for commercial, right? There's the opportunity for mixed use, there's the opportunity for residential, and the further you get from the street, the more residential in character the zoning becomes. There's still the opportunity for commercial development. For example, there's currently a 40B proposal on the south side it's part of this rezoning, and it's got its PEL letter, it's moving forward, but the developer has said that if it was rezoned, they would reconsider building housing there and potentially look at transforming that into a hotel. So it wouldn't necessarily be a total shift out of the, but it would be moving into a more commercial framework, but it would still be, it would be capped at the same height as it would be in those neighborhoods. So we're cognizant of the potential load on the neighborhood. We know that we're fortunate that has access to the Green Line. We also know the Green Line is on the wrong side of Route 9 for most of that development. And so that's our big, outstanding question is how do we work together to ensure that there is not just development there, but access, meaningful access. And that's going to take conversations with the state.
Okay.
Let me recognize Councilor Wright and Councilor Roach. I don't want to neglect you, but you answered.
I just want to make one small correction, that's all.
Okay, well, let me round it into.
I'm kind of following up with Councilor Kalis. So the R-Cut, is concerns, and in the morning and the afternoon, the backup is blocks past where those U-turns are. So I don't know, are you saying, a half mile beyond, and then you're gonna be adding all this other traffic? And I'm seeing more and more road rage and people not letting people in, so it is a difficult concept. And I was just reviewing the documents quickly. It seems like you're calling out certain buildings are gonna be so many floors are hotels, so much is medical offices, so much is apartments, or condos or whatever. So it is called out somewhat in there. Do you have a rough idea, like on space-wise? Because again, it all comes kind of down to cars and traffic. And is each of these buildings gonna have a driveway from Route 9, or do they kind of like funnel onto Heath Street, just, there's a lot of different conflicts there.
There's no new vehicular connection between Boylston and Heath to buffer Heath Street from the increased traffic. We're trying to build landscape buffers and setbacks and height restrictions closest to the existing two-family residential areas on both sides to kind of preserve those. And all of those are built into the zoning. The goal here is to make this complementary to the street on your side. You guys already have a significant retail development over there, and significant high-end commercial opportunities, supermarkets, et cetera. We're not looking to duplicate what you're doing. That wouldn't make any sense. We're looking to build complementary uses. So, right, medical offices are contemplated, hotels are contemplated. When we talk about ground floor retail, it will be more along the lines of coffee shops and so forth. Although we've had requests from the neighborhood, for example, it would be great to have a neighborhood hardware store. It would be great to have, things that are missing in the area that aren't provided on the other side of the street. But where possible, we're looking for complementary, not competitive uses.
Have you done any like traffic studies or anything like that, or a rough idea of traffic count?
That initial study is the study that we've done so far, the design study that's trying to think that through, and we've done, kind of informal traffic studies on that front. But again, right, we're at a phase now where we're trying to think about how to like approach the state and have that conversation. And so we're not at a point where we're going to the state and saying, this is it, we want to do this. We're saying we're going to have development here. It's going to change the nature of Route 9. There's no getting around it. As it gets more dense, then we have to talk about how that impacts Route 9. So how can we mitigate the increased density in a way that also protects the people who currently use it?
Excuse me, just to clarify a point, Councilor Wright, have you done a traffic generation study though? I mean, that's a little different from the traffic mitigation measures.
Right. I don't know the answer to that question. I can ask the planning team.
Let me go to, I think it was then Councilor Albright, then Councilor Getz.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So have you considered asking the developer, well, first of all, is all that property under the control of one developer?
No.
So there could be multiple developer opportunities.
Yes. So we have this one potential larger scale developer in City Realty. We've talked to all the other owners of the properties. Some of them have said we're not interested. Some of them have said we may be interested down the line. Some of them, like that owner of the 40B, has said I will consider my options, but I want to see what passes at town meeting. That's the other thing to remember here is that, take a step back from this. The Brookline Town Meeting has to ultimately pass this zoning. It would require a 2/3 majority. It's subject to amendment. And there's not consensus, right? I think there's there's vocal opposition in the community to some aspects of this that relate to height, that relate to traffic, that relate to all of these things. So it's not a guarantee that this passes in its current form or passes at all. Brookline does need commercial development, but there is a possibility that the town meeting ultimately says, you know what, we don't want this proposal to, take it back to the drawing board. So under the current proposal, we have that one developer who's looking to redevelop that stretch that is closest to Newton on the southern side of Route 9. But it's possible that will change. For example, that developer's current proposal it has the opportunity to build up to 14 stories if a certain commercial density is achieved in the building. That's a subject of dispute. I know some of the members in the neighboring precincts would like to see that reduced, some of them significantly, and that would change the character of what could be developed there. So we are, there is a possibility that this will change. So I just want to be clear to you on the committee that until May, the zoning isn't final. And even once the zoning is final, there's additional steps that need to be taken.
So does this one developer have multiple buildings? And I'll tell you why I'm asking is because have you thought about asking him to build a pedestrian walkway over Route 9?
We thought about that. I said to the chair and to the mayor when we met, that is the dream, right? The dream would be it would be some means of easy pedestrian access over Route or under Route 9. I would settle for a tunnel. It doesn't need to be an overpass. The complexity of a project like that with the state is monumental. They wouldn't be able to do it by themselves. They would really need our help. What I have committed to in our conversation with the mayor is we want the same thing there. The problem is because Route 9 has truck access, it's difficult to build an overpass, and tunnels are incredibly expensive. But I'm committed, and I know the mayor is committed to creative solutions to this problem. So yes, we have absolutely thought about it. They can't do it without significant outside investment. We would love to provide that outside investment, but again, it's going to be a team effort, and it's further in the future than this rezoning.
Okay, well, I'm just glad to see that it's on the drawing board in some way, shape, or form. And one last question is, so how many units are in the 40B that they're proposing?
That's a good question. Let me pull that up. I have that information and I can get it for you.
While you're looking for it, is the 40B the only project that they're proposing, or is it a multiple, this and that and the other, and one of them is a 40B?
That developer only has the 40B there.
Okay,
It's
All right.
further up the Brookline. That's further towards that's towards Heath Street.
Okay, well, and I don't need to know that tonight. You could maybe just let us know later.
There's a,
Yes, so I'm keeping a list here of questions and we will pass that along to the planning team on your side.
Thank you very much.
Councilor Getz?
Yeah, I just have a couple of follow-up questions. The unit density, for each of the zones, the west block, the east block, do you have any sense of that? Is it in this, in the zoning?
It's in the zone, so the density is in the zoning, the FAR and all those things are in the zoning, and they provide for a certain level of units, but yes, and all of that is currently being ironed out. The select board is potentially taking that up tomorrow night, and they'll talk through, what in practice that means in terms of if you were to build all housing here, what would it look like? If you were to build mixed use, what would it look like?
Yeah, and then the R turn or whatever you called it,
Yes.
yeah, that's actually really problematic at that intersection. I many times I'm through that intersection and you're asking someone who's turning right to cross all the lanes to then make that U-turn. And it's not gonna happen. It's too, the backup many times a day is like blocks, in terms of that specific intersection. So I don't know that that's a viable solution, for that intersection. So I'm just commenting. Unfortunately.
So just the question about scale, my understanding is, and again, subject to correction, is that the part that's subject to redevelopment right now, which is where the office park is, the other parts are not, except for the 40B, under any particular project. And these, as I understand it, don't have a special permit even yet, but they might. Is around 887,000 square feet for the towers, that's the proposal. FAR of about 3.8, commercial square footage of around 400,000, 270 residential units and 204 hotel rooms.
That's for the whole zoning area?
For that, the district, the sub-district that's near Hammond Pond Park. It's the big
denser district there. Yep.
That district. The other districts have no current development proposal other than the possible 40B, as I understand.
Right.
One of the concerns that I and others have expressed to the town administrator was why include the Star Market parking lot? Because that's something we depend on and want to preserve, even though it's not likely to be changed right now because it's all under the special permit. But if that owner ever decided to change the plans, that would affect that, which was part of the parking supply that we relied upon when we granted that special permit. So I don't know. Mr. Carey, is there a chance that that piece would be taken out in the warrant, or is that?
Yes, there's definitely a chance. We're having those conversations. I think on our end, our concern is not the parking lot, it's everything else over there. It's the possibility, for example, of some of those residential structures maybe becoming small scale retail or like a boutique hotel or something like that. That would be great. It would be, again, a complementary use in that neighborhood. It wouldn't burden the parking for the Star Market. There would be, the opportunity to do something over there. It's just the general sense too of if we're going to rezone what's on our side to have that sort of awkward triangle there. It doesn't. Unlike, I think it's just a matter too of, different, philosophies on zoning. We're trying, when we rezone, when we get approached by developers and developers say, hey, can you rezone for us? Then that becomes a big concern. People say we shouldn't be doing developer-driven redevelopment. We should be doing development based on what we want to see, not what developers want to see. And so where we can, we're trying to balance those things. We're saying, even when a developer comes to us, as is the case here, we're still trying to develop this as part of a bigger picture of what we want the neighborhood to look like. And as we said to the chair and to the mayor and to the planning team, right, because of that special permit that the Star Market has, it's very unlikely that the current owner would redevelop that in any way that would impact the Star Market without the Star Market use changing in some way. And we're not trying to incentivize that change with this zoning. With that said, right, there's a chance that this parcel comes out of the zoning altogether, just based on these conversations.
I think I would applaud that decision if it were made. I will just say that you are all aware that exit from the Star Market onto Hammond Street is a very tricky one, and the town of Brookline really has been very helpful in working with the market to create that block that's sort of marked out. And it actually works. It really is astonishing how many people will not go into that so that you can get in and out of that. And I'm a little nervous about putting something up on the corner, even hotel or anything else that maybe adversely affects the viability of that intersection. And also, if you're talking about shuttles, if they come through Newton, they've got to get approval from our bus licensing process. Situation, not that it's impossible, but it's just another step. So other questions from committee members? Councilor Roche, you had a question, just a clarification?
No, I have a clarification and some questions.
Okay.
Councilor Gordon.
Let me recognize the committee first.
Yeah.
Councilor Gordon.
Well, I don't want to belabor the RCUT. I just want to say I'm in this area multiple times a day throughout the week. And I just think there's a lot of unintended consequences. I could see people cutting through this lot, the Star Market lot, to sort of get around having to do the turning. Already people are trying to go the wrong way, sometimes down the opposite street to Heath Street. I've noticed when I'm there with all that construction going on in that corner, the movement still seems to be pretty good using the straight across. So I'm not quite sure what problem is, I know it's written out here what the problems are. And I guess I would say that I don't see this improving operational efficiencies. I figure it's also pretty easy to test, right? Not to see what happens, but I'm guessing that this is gonna cause multiple problems further down on both sides, east and west.
There are also uses north of the schools and the institutions that depend on that intersection access. So it's not just the sort of just cars, and there are all sorts of people that have to get back and forth in the morning for the school drop-offs and so forth.
Yeah, when I'm on this road, I see people, they don't want to stop for the pedestrian light that's there already because they've been waiting long enough, then they see the light and they try to go through it, and I watch it all the time. I'm like, there's someone in the lot. So I just think we could be making it more dangerous.
Councilor Roach, let me recognize you.
So you said that the roundabout was narrowed to one lane?
I believe that it's a possibility. We can go back and show that.
I want to clarify what they're proposing is, yes, I'd be happy to. What they're proposing is a new roundabout where there's a standard cross intersection. This is not affecting.
Oh, behind Florence Street.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon. You're correct, and I misspoke. Thank you.
No, I just want to clarify.
No, that's wonderful to correct.
Wonderful. Okay, so you've answered the question about.
I know that's astonishing, but never mind.
I'm with you. The relationship between the TOM and the existing parking, I think that's kind of our citywide preference is noted there. None of the traffic deals with the eastbound traffic that would be generated by any development east of Hammond Pond Parkway. And by the way, this was anticipated now 20 years ago, Chestnut Hill Square, that the merge, the crossover between eastbound traffic exiting Chestnut Hill Square and eastbound traffic on Route 9 heading down the down ramp. And it is so bad that it is frequently, there's a police officer at that, which is a sign that has failed. So I would encourage the traffic planning to deal with this eastbound conflict point between, again, traffic that wants to go right down from the second lane, right down to Hammond Pond Parkway, either to do the U-turn or any of the other movements, and then the traffic that is wanting to go eastbound and then over the bridge and continue eastbound out of Chestnut Hill Square. What we had proposed at the time, perhaps you'll remember this, Councilor Baker, then Alderman Baker, is that there be a frontage road that essentially started someplace west of Chestnut Hill Square, and that in order to go into Chestnut Hill Square, you had to commit to that frontage road, and you also had to commit to that frontage road to Hammond Pond Park. That would eliminate the crossover. And so anybody who wanted to go on Hammond Pond Parkway would have to get into the far right lane west of Chestnut Hill Square. And anybody wanting to go eastbound out of Chestnut Hill Square would have to go down, cross Hammond Pond Parkway and up slightly slower, but that would eliminate that potential, that conflict point. It would also slow traffic in that rightmost eastbound lane and make the pedestrian experience along Chestnut Hill Square and however west that frontage road went be much better. And back in the day, there was actually a huge buffer between the right-hand eastbound lane and the sidewalk, and it was actually kind of a decent pedestrian experience. So I'd be happy to write that up because it's I've described something that would be much better visually done. But if that traffic is going to be exacerbated by any development east of Hammond Pond Parkway, so that should be part of the traffic considerations.
Yeah, Councilor Gordon?
What are you talking about the Wegmans Mall when you're talking about the Chestnut Square?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And you think it's a failure, the way that when you come out and you go?
Yeah, and the indication it's a failure is, I mean, at any peak time, there's a police officer stationed at that corner because the pattern is not, it is not intuitive enough or safe enough that it doesn't require a police officer. You shouldn't need to staff that intersection.
You can't get out of there without, you
Right.
really can't get out.
You're talking
Exactly,
about
which
when
is the
you're trying to
failure.
exit
But
from
if you
Wegmans.
did what I'm proposing as a frontage road, that problem would go away because that lane would slow down. You'd get breaks in the traffic. You separate uses.
I would just comment, one thing, Mr. Administrator, that occurred with the Chestnut Hill Square is the widening of the road was a condition of the building of the grant of the special permit, if my memory is correct.
The widening of the road?
The widening of Route 9.
The widening of Route 9 from 2 lanes to 3, yes.
That was, and the city of Newton actually was the guarantor of the bonds that paid for that. We didn't have to come through and actually pay for it because of the bonds worked. But the point is that project, and I don't know how many square feet it is, we can look it up, but we didn't approve it as a special permit or as a project until we had insurance of at least the widening of the highway at that point because of the problems with traffic. So I think your traffic study about the generation is going to be important to figure out what mitigation measures you need, because that's and may cause you to one question, obviously, if you take off the table the area near the Star Market, that reduces some of the potential development pressure. It's not because it's not imminent, but it's still apparent. And then you have a sense of a little less demand. But again, I think the whole question of how this corridor works is going to be critical because it will do no one any good to have a building to go to that you can't get to. And that's a part of the concern that we all have.
Councilor Mayor, I have one other question quickly.
Yeah.
Is there any crash data, and is that a factor at Hammond Street and Route 9, or is it just pedestrian safety?
Crash, anything that's going to have a bearing on how that intersection works is going to be relevant to how we try and fix it. I know our police department keeps crash data on this, so I can try and get that to this committee. I know historically we have had accidents there. It is a prime area for accidents. So I want us to be cognizant of not just pedestrian safety, but the safety of everyone who crosses through there.
Other questions? Councilor Cayless?
Yeah, so Mr. Carey, what Councilor Roach just brought up about the potential impact on Chestnut Hill Square due to the increase in traffic, I know that's probably not of primary concern or probably not within the current traffic study, I'm not sure. But if you would think about that, to extend it to include that, that would be really helpful. And I think it would also bring in the city of Newton.
We'll be, I hope the administrators indicated the city will be part of the conversation.
Yeah.
In any event, which I very much appreciate because this is obviously joint effect. Any other questions? I do want to
Can
just,
you respond to that?
yeah, please. Mr. Carey, want to respond? The question was, can you?
Sorry, yeah, just, I just wanted to emphasize, we're, we're committed to doing, we talked about this in our staff to staff meeting. We really like the idea of some sort of task force where we're working together on this, not just on the specific issues here, but, Route 9 more broadly. It's a major thoroughfare. It's a lifeline to both of our communities. It's frequently snarled with traffic. There are a lot of things that we could be doing better, and that we could help the state with, because, it's not necessarily a state priority. But the other thing that, doesn't keep me up at night, but, it's lodged in the back of my mind, is that in the event that they bury the pike, they level the Mass Pike, traffic on other traffic on other roads is going to go up, and that includes on Route 9. And so we all have to be ready. Under the current federal administration, probably not going to happen, but things change. And I don't want us to say that just because that it's not going to happen now, it means it's never going to happen. So I think we got to be in good communication with each other, to talk about how we're going to ensure that our shared roadway continues to serve the purpose it needs to serve. So, this is a conversation that's being driven by a specific incidence, this rezoning, but I don't think this conversation should stop when this rezoning is completed and we've addressed these immediate issues. I think we got to work hand in hand with the state to flag the continuing issues we have with Route 9 and how we can make it better.
Thank you. I just want to say I've got a representative of the town meeting. Ms. Khan, do you want to identify yourself?
Yes, so I'm Janice Khan, town meeting member from precinct 15, so this project is in our precinct. I can answer a couple of questions that came up. One was how many units are in the 40B? There's 104 units planned. It's a 6-story 40B project. And it went through the zoning board of appeals, but the decision's being actually appealed. So that was one question. Another thing that hasn't been brought up, actually it hasn't even been brought up in Brookline yet, is that this building is going to be very tall, right? It could be 14 stories. And there are some shadow studies that show that the shadows go across Route 9 at certain times of the day, would go across Route 9 and actually crosses over onto land that belongs to the street. Not a lot, but a little bit, but just be aware that there will be some shadows on Route 9. And I don't know what that means. The other thing that I don't think that the traffic study Kittleson did takes into consideration is that one of the modifications that MassDOT wanted for the 40B that's 6 stories, that's right at the corner of Hammond and Route 9, is right now you can't take, if you're going west on Route 9, you can't take a U-turn there to go east. But that is going to be taken down so that people will be making a U-turn there. So to the point about the R-cut, so that will also add more traffic sort of turning east at that point. So those are a few things to consider. Also, Brookline's fire station is on Hammond Street. So we are looking at that. And there are also modifications to Hammond Street that are in the works that will narrow Hammond Street, add a bike lane, add a traffic light down there. And those are the notes that I made that relate to comments that were made here. One thing that about the frontage road, this project had through its process of talking with the neighbors, is planning to do an internal frontage road, very similar to what the street has, so that the traffic would move within that 5-acre parcel.
Thank you. I should mention that the shadow study is part of the slide deck that was linked to in the memo that I put together to attach to the agenda. And so all of the proposed traffic modifications and a variety of other things that are part of this whole idea are there to take a look at. And also we'll have for you the text of the zoning amendment, but we do appreciate, Mr. Carey, you taking time. It's not often that we get the town administrator, Brookline, to come to spend time with the City of Newton City Council representatives. So we're grateful to you and your colleagues for your willingness to do that. And also, thank you very much, Ms. Khan and Ms. Baker for joining us. Any other questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to hold because I think we want to see what happens to this. But there's a motion to hold. All those in favor will say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? The ayes have it. Harry, thank you and your colleagues very much. We look forward to continuing the conversation and learning more about this as it goes forward.
Well, very much. Great night.
Thank you.
Thank you for allowing me to make comments here as well, and
You're always welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to trade places with the vice chair because she's going to run the balance of the meeting.
So Dave, are they talking about other like changes to the ruling in connection with this haircut?
That's fine.
No. I mean, it's gotta be studied. I didn't realize how preliminary it was.
It seems like they haven't really gone on.
Yeah. Okay. So the next item is 59-26, presentation and discussion on Port of the Newton Housing Priorities Task Force. Councilors Albright, Malachy, Wright, and Getz requesting a presentation discussion regarding a report created by the Affordable Housing Trust, the Housing Partnership, and the Fair Housing Committee, Affordable Housing Deficit for Low and Moderate Income Households. This report, prepared by the Newton Housing Priority Task Force, formed in late 2023, analyzes the city's affordable housing landscape to answer 3 questions. 1, what is the existing supply and what factors led to its development? 2, whom does the existing affordable housing serve? And 3, how does this supply match the need? And I think is Ms. Houston going to present, so why don't you come on up?
Councilor Wright can actually do this presentation at this point. I think this is probably at least your 3rd time.
Yes.
So you'll see we've changed it just a little. Just for Pam. Only. Thank you so much for inviting us to share this report. Great. And you have it in your packet. I realized there was one tiny mistake, so when we get to it, I'm gonna tell you, it was just a miss. Yeah. See, you do know it, maybe you should do it. This task force started in 2023 as the Affordable Housing Trust was really just getting started. And one of the things we realized is we didn't actually have a clear sense of what affordable housing we had, what we needed, or what the priorities should be. And, it's hard to choose where to allocate limited funds without some clear direction. And so the citizen task forces, if we can go to the next slide, please. The Affordable Housing Trust, the Housing Partnership, and the Fair Housing Commission, which were then late as we're in the middle of the process, were combined. And the Newton Housing Authority, along with staff, formed the task force to really answer, next slide, please, these 3 questions. What is the existing supply of affordable housing and whom does it serve? Does the supply match needs? And what lessons from the existing supply can inform future efforts? Before I go on, I want to thank Esther Schlorholtz, who was the chair of the Fair Housing Commission and is now a member of the Fair Affordable Housing Partnership, and Councilor Albright. And then on this, we have at least I know Marva Slatkin is from the Fair and Affordable Housing Partnership is on screen. And perhaps other people. Next slide. Okay, I'm gonna, we're now, some of the PowerPoint is not coming through, so I know that you have an older version.
Is this the version you sent me earlier
No,
today?
you have an older version of PowerPoint. So that, unfortunately, so I'm gonna tell you.
Something pop in.
Oh, there's
I
blank
I have it
spaces.
on here. Why don't I share my screen?
That
Yeah,
would
I
be
can s-
and then we'll actually.
Hi, Randy.
Wait, what is different? Because I'm looking at the same slide.
He has an older version.
There's a
He
bill.
must have an older version as well.
Here.
There's a what?
There's something.
Randy,
Oh,
they took the
oh.
slide down
It's an
and your face was there.
You'll
Your face is there
see
now.
when we get to slide 4.
That's why I asked you to share the meeting. Yeah, right.
That's like, I got it from Jack.
You know,
Okay.
there it is, you see the title, thank you,
Okay.
was missing, and so,
Oh.
all right, so, the numbers, with one exception, the numbers in, and I'm happy to send everybody a PDF of this afterwards.
I think we
So
have.
that you'll have the.
Yes,
Fill it out.
What's missing?
The PDF is done with Miles's
Info.
computer, so it's an older version.
Yeah, that you know, one of the people who worked the most on this has exactly the same problems, and every time he'd edit it, he'd say, why do you have those big white spaces? So, all right, I'm gonna walk, let me just tell you, this is the quick snapshot of what our housing stock looks like. And the numbers, we stopped doing the count in June of 2025. And so this is from that time period. The affordable units in here are defined as 110% AMI and below that are in some way deed restricted. So they're not going to be, most of you, I think, will be familiar with the subsidized housing inventory that indicates our compliance with 40B. These numbers are not going to match that for two reasons. One, that just goes up to 80% AMI because that's how the state measures it. And two, under 40B, 100% of a rental property is counted on the SHI. But what we wanted to know is, what do we really have for affordable housing in Newton? So this is not the only important housing issue for Newton, but we had to have some guardrails on how much we could actually study. So this won't cover all of the new additions to the housing stock. It won't, but it just gives us a sense. So what, and the one last caveat, then we'll be moving a little faster, but is that the total units we've tried to update, but they're not. That is less accurate. The affordable housing units, we've really spent a lot of time scrubbing. But the affordable units, we're not going to have a great count until the 2030 census, when they all get updated.
You mean the total units?
The total units, that's right. So in general, we have about 33,000 700 units in Newton. Of those, 275, or in a minute you'll see slightly more, are affordable. And the affordable units, 2,000, what did I say? I'm gonna ask you to help me with that.
Okay.
I have a little dyslexia and it comes out
This is not
numbers.
good. We're both dyslexic.
Yeah, oh, great. So 19% of all rental units are affordable. less than 0.5% of the ownership units are affordable. And almost 70%, 69% of our stock is ownership. So that just what you would expect for a community like Newton. And that means, of course, the 31% of rent. Okay, next slide.
One question.
Oh, wait, can we wait?
Sure,
We're gonna go into
absolutely.
sections. Okay, this one, but otherwise we'll wait to
Do you have a projection for all the housing that's being built?
I do not, and I'm happy to work with Councilor Wright to try and get that. I do on rental, and I'm gonna, but just the affordable.
That's fine.
Only thing I counted was affordable, and that's one of my new slides. So this is the way we're gonna, that this is organized. We have 3 sets of policy recommendations. We have recommendations for rental housing, for ownership housing, and for preservation. And for each section, we're gonna give you a data snapshot. I'll answer your question with, on the data snapshot for rental. Then tell you what the recommended policy is. The data that informed us in making that recommendation and ways we might implement it. Okay, so this is, Mayor Laredo said, we gotta start with what the policy we were going to try to do, and he was right, it makes it a much clearer presentation. So next is, we're gonna look at update of affordable housing. And, all right, and we're going to just quickly move from this slide. What this tells you, what we said before, 6% of the total housing stock or 19% of the rentals are affordable rentals. But next slide, this is the one place, oh, you know what, you have an older one. Okay, so I'm going to, if you all look at your own slides, this is, I think you actually have it.
So I haven't updated it. If you want,
Can you do it? That would be terrific.
Oh, I do have it on this one,
no,
but
you
it's
gotta have it on this
on my.
Yeah.
Wait, what size
We're
are
gonna
you-
ask Susan if we can change once more, and I'll talk,
Okay.
and I'll tell you
Do
about.
you wanna open it, because I'm not.
I read
on
it.
Zoom.
Oh.
You just had it.
Well, no, I don't have it.
No, she
Okay,
hasn't.
okay, I'm gonna go to
She didn't
Zoom.
have it.
Miles, will you let me in?
It always goes to Randy.
Yeah. And let me just tell you what we're going to,
Miles, it'll be me.
this is good, you know, like, this is true participation of the entire committee in the presentation.
My, Cyrus is gonna zoom in.
I'm sorry,
So-
man.
What we did, because there's been good development happening on affordable housing. And that we wanted to make sure we were capturing since last June. And the 3 things that have happened is that the Newton Gardens project with 112 units has come online. We've put our money in. Now, all of the affordable units are not yet online because they're still waiting for some subsidy dollars. But the units are available to be rented. And so we're showing those as existing. Now, our affordable housing, we have to get to the numbers that really we can count on having. We've combined our existing and we've updated existing to include Newton Gardens. And we have in construction because we're pretty confident that if it's already in construction, it's gonna count. And so building 3 of Northland, this is my piece that you can see, there's my one mistake you're gonna get. Building 3 of Northland is in construction. So we're pretty confident that that's gonna happen. And we've added that into the permitted in construction. And for a total existing and in construction of 2,118 units. Permitted, but not in construction. And I think everybody's been around this long enough to know until you break ground, you can't guarantee but we wanted to count what we've permitted. And so we added the balance of the Northland Needham Street. And when we cut this off, those were the changes that had happened. And that adds 587 units for a total of existing and permitting of 2,705 units. So I think that we can feel good about making some progress in our rental units. We need more, we definitely need more, but we made some progress.
The 587, that's not just Northland.
No, that's including everything that was in construction and actually,
Well, those
in-
are not in construction.
587.
So it'll be like on Craft Street, because it's been
Got it,
permitted
got it.
and things like that.
but it's not in
It's
construction, so it's not counted. If
Yeah.
you want to know what's in that number, if you look at the full report, it's actually in the footnotes. We provide the list of units and afterwards I'm happy to look at it with you. Okay, so next slide, please. So here are the priorities for rental that we're gonna talk some about. We prioritize low-income family rental housing. And why do we do that? Because 2 to 4 unit housing that's generally available. It's not set aside for seniors or for people with special needs. Newton has 437 units. That's only 22% of our affordable rentals. And families are both important for our community. They're really our future of our community. They and the future of our schools. And we're not serving as deeply. And we'll go through why. We're really suggesting that, recommending that housing prioritize low income, which is 60% area median income and low. But we want to recognize that there's a real pressing need for every type of affordable rental housing. And so we need to support opportunities as they emerge. Next slide. So we talked about affordable types of affordable rental housing. Newton has much more senior housing than general housing that includes family. Seniors serves 60 or 62 and over. And it's 54% of our housing. 14% is supportive housing that includes things like group homes and housing for formerly homeless, and victims of domestic violence, and general occupancy housing. So that's everything else, and that's only 32%. And of that, a piece of that is for families. And so, and we're just gonna go 2 slides, please. There's a really important lesson about permitting, and I think that's particularly germane to this committee. General housing primarily serves moderate income people because most of the general housing exists because of 40B and inclusionary zoning. And they incentivize. Did you say, Miles, did you have
Oh,
something?
I'm sorry. I'm trying to count counselors who are in the room. I apologize
Okay,
for.
all right. And so that tends to include push the income up. But and senior housing serves primarily low income because it was primarily created through deep subsidy programs. Next slide, please. So how do we grow this supply of affordable rental housing? First, we need to carefully leverage city funds. When we looked back at 10 years of funding review of city investment, we found that projects with 10 or fewer units spent an average of $351,000 per unit. And properties with 33 to 49 units spent an average of 64,000 per unit. Now, I want to tell you one other thing. We know there was enormous inflation in construction price over that 10 years. The smaller projects were in the earlier years, and the larger projects were in, so that it is an even larger gap. So we can target permitting in ways that we both to encourage continued use of inclusionary zoning and 40B. And as we reach safe harbor, we can include friendly 40Bs that give the city more control, but also allow continued creation of that 25% affordability. And one of the things that I would urge the council to think about is, can you, if both provisions allow you to encourage deeper affordability for fewer units, and the priorities task force felt like the deeper affordability was more important than even the number of units. Hard to get to otherwise. We can take advantage of both public owned properties, both city owned, and the city completed a land use study of vacant land that's available to look at, and state properties. And I know you all have talked a lot about how do we get more state properties. And then the final piece, and this is a really active piece, the city could decide to incentivize private development of family rentals in the same way that happened with the Armory. And so that's produced deeply affordable family units, and that's a great model to think about. There are many tools that the city has to do that. So that's rental housing, and if we can, we'll go on to home ownership. Next slide. All right, so not a lot of housing to talk about. Less than 0.5% of our ownership housing is affordable rental, 88 units. Next slide.
Affordable.
Wait, you said ownership.
Affordable home ownership, thank you, thank you. Esther, could you hand me my water? Thank you. All right, so our recommendation is that we rely on Chapter 40B and inclusionary zoning as the most cost-effective way to add units, and that the city consider, if we're going to be looking at affordable homeownership, and I think this is probably true for middle income ownership housing as well, that we really make sure that we're clear about the policies we're trying to accomplish with our affordable homeownership, and make sure that we've aligned. And this is a conversation that many communities have, and actually state funding agencies have been having over the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm gonna tell you why. So next, why not just create it ourselves? Because creating affordable homeownership is extremely costly for the city. You remember we talked about leverage with rental? You can't leverage. We can't access the state funds that we could leverage for homeownership. Newton is not eligible. It's only available to low income census tracts and gateway cities. So this is a really very conservative estimate. If your total development cost is $800,000, hard to get to these days. The maximum sales price is $320,000. That means the subsidy per unit is nearly $500,000. And you know, that would wipe our money out in just a few units. So 40B and inclusionary zoning remain the best approach. Next slide, please. The one other way that the city encourages affordable home ownership is if an owner can find something on the market that they can actually afford. The city can provide it, they're just a few each year, but down payment and closing cost assistance, and then there are state programs that provide mortgage interest right now. Both kinds of affordable housing trigger deed restrictions that require resales are pegged to the original area median income. So typically that's 80% area median income. Next slide, please. I fear that's gonna be really hard to see, but if you can see the yellow line and the blue line. The blue line is area median income over a 25-year period, and the yellow line is the resale price. This is for the state as a whole. Newton's resale price has actually gone up at a much steeper rate than that. So what happens is when you have those restrictions, you don't, so let's go to the next slide. Home ownership doesn't equal market rate ownership. It's not, for those of us who have the privilege of being homeowners, it's not the same. It does provide great housing stability, some control, some sense of being part of and having an investment in the community. So there are many important benefits, and it provides some return on investment, but not the level that you get with unrestricted home ownership. You don't have advantage of the appreciating equity, home equity for kids' college loans, to support your business expansion, bridge a tough economic time, or for people like me, retirement. And so communities have really been grappling with what they're trying to accomplish and really thinking about ways to tweak those restrictions or to consider them. So that's a conversation that Newton could have. And I think that we don't always really understand what we're talking about when we say we want more affordable home ownership. And I'll tell you, over 35 years, I've argued both sides, vehemently argued both sides of this. So I don't think there's a right answer. And so the major recommendations, our major next step is, if we're interested in promoting more affordable home ownership or even middle income ownership, this is a good conversation for us to have. Okay, next slide. We're getting through this, and thank you for sticking with me. Let's talk about preserving our existing affordable homes, because we have more than 2,000 units, but we want to make sure that we keep them for the long term. So next slide, please. In the next 10 years, there are 302 affordable units representing 541 supportive housing inventory units that are at risk of being lost.
How do those
So
numbers
so
correspond?
remember that 100%, and we're gonna see that actually in an example in just a minute. 100% of a rental project, it counts on the supportive housing inventory. It was a way to make communities feel better about 40B when 40B was created. So, you know, you get 100 unit 40B and 25 of those units are affordable, but 100 units go on the supportive housing inventory. That's why your SHI list overstates how many affordable units there are. Okay, and then other risks, physical deterioration, financial problems, market forces. We have a concentration of 5 companies that own 68% of our affordable housing. So that's a potential concentration risk. So next slide. The most important thing we can do, our most important recommendation is to plan for and invest to protect those 275 affordable homes. And that's an ongoing process. And that needs, I think that we're gonna see why that's a priority for the city. And we can do that with it. We need a 5 to 10 year rolling inventory. It takes a long time to deal with expiring units, so you want a good lead time. You can't do it in the last year, and it cannot be preserved. And then we need to stay on top of our really critical owners to make sure that they continue to be viable. Next slide. And we're gonna just skip this one and go to the next one. There are, of those 302 units, there are 51 units with 223 subsidized housing inventory units that are at risk or have been lost in 2025, 2026. Those include where I'm an 8-unit group home, and I am not sure staff is checking on what happened with that. We know, those of you who might know Evans Park, that Benchmark owns, and had 23 affordable units and 115 supportive housing inventory units. That's already gone. That expired, and staff were not able to negotiate to keep those affordable units. And it's owned by Benchmark, and Benchmark has another project, Cabot Park, with 20 affordable units and 100 SHI units that are expiring this year. And we don't know the outcome. So this is really an important priority. And I just can't emphasize enough how much preserving what we have is really important. And so next slide. What we want to also, while we're doing that, make sure that we're thinking about these 5 companies, 3 of whom are nonprofits, making sure that they are able to have the resources to maintain the housing stock in good condition. And I'm going to focus on one, and then I'm just about done. The most vulnerable, next slide please, is the housing authority. It's not because they are not good. They're very, very talented, dedicated staff. But housing authorities, this is a state and national problem. Housing authorities are really challenged by long-term capital and operating underfunding. And it's resulted in really inadequate capital and operating reserves. So when you see a housing authority project in property and you say, oh, that doesn't look as good as I'd like, that's because they are making do with really not enough resources. And we as a community want to be able to support them. So one of the things in the Affordable Housing Act, the state actually dedicated 1.5 billion for affordable housing. I mean, for public housing. And that money is really, it is so competitive across the state. It will only go for properties that both rehab the existing housing and add new housing. And the good news is that the housing authority has identified several good sites. And so let's think about being open and working with them, and hopefully they will focus on family housing as they're looking at that. But so that's a really immediate thing we can think about doing. And I'll tell you, as we did this study, my thinking about what we needed the support we needed to provide for the housing authority has shifted, because I always did private affordable housing development, and I had a little bias. And then I started looking at where they stand in our housing stock and realized that's really the biggest base of our housing. So it's a hard lesson. So there we are. And I'm gonna go to two last slides if we can. I have some recommendations for each of our committees that I'm gonna skip over. You can look at this at your own. But if you look at recommendations for further study, next slide after this, please. There are three, and I think two are particularly important. There are three things that I think are worth continuing to look at. One is to refine our housing production goals. More important is if we are interested in homeownership, I think we need to have that conversation. And the final one that I don't want to understate, we looked at affordable housing, but we also need to think about middle income housing. And that's it's a separate set of issues. But I think that as a community, we would benefit. So.
Definition of middle income.
Oh, thank you. I meant to say that at the very beginning. I think that the effective middle income, the middle market definition in Newton is really like 150 to 210% AMI. Because if you look at what it takes to buy into the Newton market, you can't do it if you're less than that amount. And that's a really important, those are young families that are just starting out. Those are, you know, sort of our middle income people that don't have an opportunity in Newton. So last slide is just what I hope, which is that we can become a leader among our peer communities in responding to the housing crisis. And I think we've actually made some good headway in the past few years. So that's what our task force, where we've got.
Okay, thank you very much. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna get people raise their hands. And because there's so much material, I think a lot of us has questions. When that person, you know, hones in on one thing, I'll let other people ask questions during that time, and then I'll take the next person on my list and we'll go to that area. So I see Counselor Albright and that's, I think your hand was up. No? Okay.
Let the record be joined by Councilor Dixon.
Oh, thank you.
Councilor Maliki as well.
Oh, Maliki, thank you.
Okay, so I have,
She's also seen this at least 3 times.
yes. Counselor Albright, Getz, Baker, any other counselors that have some questions? You can have questions as we go along. I have a lot of questions, so we'll get to that. So we'll start with Counselor Albright.
So the first thing I want to say is the people who worked on this study from these various task forces and commissions and committees, we are so lucky to have them. They all work in the field. They know what the heck they're talking about, and frankly, I don't think we could have afforded to pay for this kind of a study and this research. And they were supported by the planning department staff to help with the numbers. But thank you so much for being, all of you, thank you so much for being willing to take the time to do this work. It's invaluable. A couple of short questions. Does the $80,000 per unit for home ownership in the cost apply?
800.
What did I say? 80.
Well, she's so sick today.
We wish it was 80.
That's page 17.
What affordability problem?
Does that apply if it was like a 30-unit condominium? Because
I think even for a condominium, even for a 12 to 1,500 square foot condominium, that would be below what we're seeing that is in the market today, that to produce in the market today. And remember, you've got land costs in addition to your construction costs. So yes, but condominiums, and zero lot line townhouses and things like that are great ways to reduce your development costs. And there are some techniques we could consider that are worth exploring to produce more affordable opportunities. Not really affordable, but at middle market, perhaps we could reach.
Okay, so, you know, you talked about the fact that we're losing so many units from the restriction. And we don't ever have the housing staff, the planning housing staff, come to this committee. I'm wondering what you thought about having them be more part of our process, so that, you know, when, maybe there's a way we could help. I don't know whether it's, you know, the budget is pretty constrained, but maybe there are other ways that we can help when, as they're looking at these things that are coming off the deed restrictions, maybe we should know, we should work with them and know what they're looking at as problems, and maybe there's a way we can help. That's all I have to say.
I think that's brilliant. We didn't wanna tell you what you should be doing. One of our recommendations is that we would like that 5 to 10 year rolling plan to come to the housing partnership. You're the policy arm of the council, and you know, I think that would be great if once a year you had the staff come in and tell you about the state of our existing affordable housing. Because then it prioritizes it for staff. They have way too much on their plates. So what you tell them is the priority, that will help them decide where they should put their time.
So beyond just reporting to us once a year, I think they should say, these are the things we're thinking about that we need help with. And
I think that's great.
Can I go back to page 17 is where you first had a question? And see if anybody, I don't know if Miles can put that up there or whoever.
It's me.
Oh, page 17. And so I had a question, and just to understand it better.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I did go through it.
yeah, so these are home ownership, is this? Yeah, okay, so you're saying, you know, average of 800,000, and then the sale price is 320. So for developers, I thought if a developer has a condo project, they eat that $480,000 that it costs for that unit as part of the kind of shares it about the other
If it was
costs.
a 40B. That's right. This is,
No.
if it wasn't inclusionary zoning or 40B, if the
Okay.
developer didn't have to do affordable housing,
Okay,
if in the way we do rental housing, if we said, thank you, that's our important.
so
clarification.
IZ, so with the IZ and with our condos, we're not putting that
That's right.
$480,000 subsidy.
right.
Okay,
The rest of the market rate prices are skewed to
Yes.
cover, to fill this gap.
On this point, though, that 480,000, because the developers tend to make homeownership projects, or homeownership projects in the city tend to be smaller, and inclusionary zoning pencils out at scale. So the 480 may not be a cost to the city, but the 480 is a poison pill for inclusionary zoning. We saw that on Com Ave near BCT, where the developer was explicit and said, we're building 6 because it doesn't trigger inclusionary zoning. So the 480 may not be coming out of the city coffers, but it is operating as a discouragement to homeownership.
yeah, but in
And-
part of our IZ at 7, they don't pay the full cost of the 600. It's
9 or something units? Was it higher?
yeah, so they do a percentage of that too.
And let me tell you, historically, when you look at the homeownership that was produced under IZ, several of the projects were done by SEB, by Bob Engler, who was committed to affordable housing and to 40B. And he was able to do 40B homeownership projects that produced, he actually did far more than 25%. They tended to be 50 to 60% affordable. And he used the market to actually write down the cost of the affordable. So it is possible to do those sorts, but it has to be a motivated developer. And they were smaller projects.
But then it's across subs.
That's right, all cross subsidy.
Okay, Councilor Albright, do you have some more questions?
Well, it's one more. It's about the Craft Street 40B coming through now. I know that the ZBA asked Craft Street people to do deeper affordability in that project. So what's the best thing to do? Should we support their request to do deeper affordability? Should we ask them to send that money over to the Affordable Housing Trust instead, which is the one that provides more units and more leverage?
You're talking about the 38 Craft, the new,
Yes,
the new
The
Craft.
new one that's coming.
I
One
haven't,
next door.
yeah, I haven't really studied that. I think that it, you know, I'd love to hear what other people who might have looked at the numbers a little more closely would say. It is difficult. We're in our most recent project that we invested funds in, we got 58 units of affordable housing of deeply affordable housing for $2 million. So less than $50,000 a unit. So you know, there's a lot of leverage, but mixed income housing is also a really valuable piece. So I think that's something that's worth having more discussion, and I think that the council has really been engaged in some important discussions about in lieu payments, and perhaps that's one that, you know, we might even have a community conversation about in lieu payments. The council could sponsor an evening of community conversations.
Just about that.
Yeah, oh, okay, I
just
got
changed
back from
it, yeah.
vacation.
Yes.
So I think that's it for my questions, except to say, could you stay interested and involved in what we do as a community? Because we're the committee that's creating ordinances that might impact affordable and middle income housing. So if you guys could all stay involved and comment on what we're doing, it would be useful.
We would love to.
So following up on Councilor Albright, so I think where you're trying to get to is, I think the ZBA should be working with them to see what they need. And from this data, it seems more family housing is really what we need, not the very deeply affordable ones. That's what it seems like, so.
We need deeply affordable family housing.
Yeah.
Both.
That's what we need, yeah.
Just one.
That's
That's
particular, because our family housing tends to be 80% AMI. And so what we really have a shortage of is deeply affordable family housing, but all family housing
Yeah.
is important.
So that's something that they should know, the ZBA,
That's
so
right.
that's something that they should try to negotiate.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question on this part? No? Okay, Councilor Getz, please.
Thank you. So, first, there's two pieces of movement here right now is, just in terms of the properties that are falling off. And I had always thought that that was something planning and law, and that everything would be in perpetuity. That I knew that there were some projects that had fallen off because they didn't qualify through the process of even the lottery, or, there was a couple that that didn't make it through. But now to hear about these benchmark properties, that's a little sort of like, how did that happen? Just out of like that conversion from the 30 years to the in perpetuity, I thought that's something that would happen 5-6 years ago. So
I understand and that in general, staff are trying to do in perpetuity, and particularly home and CDBG are done in perpetuity. The most recent deed restriction that was fairly recent that I looked at was a 40-year. There are reasons, think about private developers. We as homeowners have, you have to refinance periodically to reinvest and renew your capital. And so developers actually anticipate like 15 to 20-year maximum before they refinance. So affordable developers still have to refinance even if their use restrictions extend. So you have to keep that's part of staying mindful about what our important affordable housing developers need. But the other thing is, there are usually 5 to 10 sources of financing on deeply affordable projects. Do you know where we are? We're at the bottom. We're at the bottom. So all of the the first mortgagee, and then all of the, there's usually mezz debt and soft debt, and then you get to us. And so in the event of a foreclosure or a project that can't make it, often by the time it gets to us, we're not even at the table. We're not even at the table. So it's really important that we stay on top of and not just look at when the use restrictions, but look at when projects are going to be refinancing, even if our use restrictions last. And to be good partners. To be good partners. Developers are not bad people. Even for-profit developers. Of course, the nonprofit, they're all good people. But and we have to be good partners.
So on this point.
Yep.
You mentioned Cabot, I think it's called, or units that are being rolled off.
And
What are we
Newton
doing
Center.
to try to preserve those? And can we approach the developer, or do we know the situation?
I talked with staff today, I think that they had some conversations. It's the same developer for the two projects, it's Benchmark. And the Cabot property did just expand and has 3 new deed restricted units coming on. The city hoped that they might be able to do something that's above my pay grade. That's a staff issue. We're happy to have support. I'll tell you some of the
When you say staff issue, you mean that staff? of the city should-
staff in the law department are negotiating with the developer.
I see.
What do they negotiate about? Do they give them money? What
Could be incentive. It could be, I would have to talk to the developer to understand. You'd want to understand what their situation was, and because they can make more money if
Could
it's
we
not
have a
deed
role?
restricted.
Could we have a role as, I mean,
Absolutely.
what?
could be advisors?
I mean, maybe there's a discussion to be had.
That's
right. The council, this committee and
And
the
law.
planning department and
Yeah.
law about something like this specifically and what options there are.
And I will tell you, I'm not gonna tell you who it is, but one of the premier national experts in expiring use happens to be a Newton resident. And I think the council, there are several people in this city who really know this side of the business really well, that I'm sure they're great citizens. I'm sure they'd be happy to.
Anybody, I have a question.
I'm not done.
I have a question on this.
You are.
So I thought most units coming online now are in perpetuality. Perpetuity. Yeah, perpetuity, that's my dyslexia.
Yeah.
Forget those syllables. Anyways, and I'm surprised to hear it's like 40 years. I thought we were doing all of them now.
Yeah.
Okay, but what would be good, I'd like to see the data in that, but when you're getting all this data to put when they expire too, because that would be helpful.
I think that would be fabulous. One of the, I might have reached more than my limit of data research.
But there's wrong data, I thought.
That's right.
Right.
Those sorts of things would be great, like law student projects.
Any other questions on this?
Yeah, okay, I was looking for the dashboard, because the dashboard it has the expiration date, you know, so that then you can sort of, the housing dashboard is kind of what we're asking for. So back to my chat. All right, the friendly 40Bs, and then that study that was done by the collaborative.
Yes.
I do think that that's actually something that we need to discuss. you
What's the
know,
dream collaborative?
It's the one where they looked at all the municipal
Oh,
sites.
yeah.
And also the housing authority sites, because I think that's where potentially we have the most possibility of, you know, especially with the affordable housing sites, you know.
Exactly
you
right,
know,
exactly
So
right.
I sort of wonder how we can make those things happen. You know, just simply out of, you know, just all the pieces that need to come to the table to activate those and to, you know, make them, you know, come to fruition.
Well, I think if some of the counselors would like to do some thinking about that, I am happy to buy lunch and bring some folks who are really interested in thinking about it. And to see if we can come up with a strategy.
Yeah,
I mean, I could explain how we got to Austin
how you
Street.
got to, you know, there was
Yeah.
a full inventory and then it narrowed down to like, I think 4 sites, I can't remember what the final total was, or the final
That's right.
designation. And I absolutely feel that this is a launch pad, you know, in the sense of being able to, you know, really take hard looks at those sites.
Great, thank you.
So I feel like that's missing from this conversation now. And then for the, you know, there's a lot of history here, just in terms of like how the trust activated the new gardens. People need to understand that in that equation. And then I also feel like, you know, we, especially with the housing authority, you know, leveraging dollars. I feel as if they could very much be really good. It's important for us to sort of, you know, try, because they're such a large portion of the inventory. I think it's really important to be very collaboratively, because state dollars are not going to come to us. So we need to figure out a way to be creative about financing in order for them to move forward.
And I will tell you, Newton Gardens and the Beacon project on Washington Street that
Oh,
is
yeah.
just,
Yeah.
those are high priority for the state. And the state
For
has
the state.
absolutely, the state really wanted to see what's called naturally occurring affordable housing. That's what Newton Gardens was, taking housing that's affordable and making sure it stays affordable.
Do you want to explain to people if they don't know what the city did to help with it?
So the city went in very quickly and helped. It's being developed by, it is owned now by Wynn Residential, which is a large national developer and property manager who has great resident services, critical for us. And we provided very fast financing to help them move very quickly, and supported conversation with the governor's office, and they and Wynn has a lot of political clout.
But we provided money to them.
We provided, that's right, we
How much?
provided,
2 million.
gosh,
2 million?
2 million went to
3
Washington
million, thank
Street.
you, thank you.
Yeah, it's
3
like
million.
Washington Street.
And this is how many units, 100?
It's 112, it's a very unusual structure, so it's 112 units.
Multiple buildings.
40 in multiple buildings, great shape. I was astounded. And 40 units are affordable, 30 units, I'm sorry, are affordable, 65 and below. Of those, 16 are extremely low income, 30% and below. Those are supported with rental housing vouchers that allow the tenant to pay 30% of their income, and the voucher pays the rest of the affordable rent. And those are the ones, remember I said, the vouchers have, some of them just got awarded by the state. And so there, and some are being provided by the Newton Housing Authority. So, and until we have those vouchers, those units stay at below 80% AMI, but they'll drop down and they'll be rented at affordable rents to the as the next available unit, as units open up. The rest of the units, the 82 remaining units are all rent restricted at 110% AMI. Just like you could glaze off if you want at this point. And half of them are also income restricted and half of them are not. And that was a negotiation, not just with Wynn, but with their investors who didn't want to be locked into having to income restrict 100% of those. But what it means, this is what's really important. It means that in 20 years, they'll still be priced at 110% AMI. So the rents will still be affordable and people may have to scramble to get onto the waiting list, but they have to be rented to the lower income person on a waiting list. And so we felt like it really preserved it. Otherwise, those units the rents would have escalated. The property right across the street, same building type, but got converted to luxury housing. So that's why NOAA is so important.
Okay, on this subject?
Yes, I just want to say that Peter Sargent, who's the vice chair,
yes,
said, Peter's been working in affordable housing his whole career. He said, I never thought I would see Wynn Development and Beacon Communities come to Newton. And I think we can feel good about the fact that we have a housing trust and that we have the DCOD. And that's what attracted those two totally affordable. They do only affordable housing and they came to Newton for the first time. I just think we can feel good about that.
Same subject.
Well, I'm not sure, so.
Go ahead.
I'll ask you. So there's a lot of data and a lot of different perspectives here, but part of the value of having trust and having counsel, right, part of that is that you're doing a lot of homework sort of outside our range of vision. But what I'm trying to understand is that I hear this and sort of from an outside perspective, preserving your affordable units is your biggest priority.
No.
Okay.
Remember the three sets of priorities, and the two biggest are create more affordable family housing, low-income family housing, and make sure we keep what we've got. And then figure out what we want to do about homeownership as a community.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to figure out is where there are a variety of priorities and each of them have different sort of expense profiles. But if you could work at trying to keep the units affordable beyond their term limits.
Yes.
I mean, what does that involve, and is that a better use of the money than to put it into one unit? You know, I'm trying to figure out what the trade-offs are.
I don't think it's an either or. I think that it's a both and. We need to both be expanding our affordable housing and because we have an extreme shortage of housing in the state as a whole, and we're concerned with affordable housing. So we need to expand housing, but at the same time, we don't want to be losing what we've got. So you have to do both.
The both and strategy involves some choices about relative, what is your portfolio of investments? You have a certain amount of.
That's right.
And what I'm trying to understand is, if you say my biggest, best investment is to try and maintain the housing I've got versus one more unit of family housing, as desirable as that may be, is it better to 30 units, some plural number units to stay affordable versus trying to get one new unit that's going to be.
And I would say that's not the question. As an affordable housing owner and through a nonprofit, we always had a plan for what we were going to need to do to keep our existing portfolio in great shape. And we had a plan to be adding new units. And both were important and both were part of our financial plan. So part of the reason that we did this study was so that we had our arms around what our needs were, so that we could plan and be really responsible. You all gave us a big responsibility. And we felt like we had to do it well.
You're the experts, and I appreciate all that. I'm just trying to understand. So what I'm hearing is that you prefer to have a divided portfolio basis, which is some is going to be invested in new and some is going to be invested in existing, right?
That's right.
And I'm just trying to understand the portion of, if I buy stocks or bonds, I can buy more stocks or less bonds, it's a portfolio, but there are decisions about relative emphasis. I'm just trying to
That's right.
understand what your relative emphasis.
I don't have we don't have our arms around what our expiring use requirements have been. We have had, but in the time that the trust has been in existence, we've invested some in expiring use with Coleman House. And we've invested some in expanding in new production. So we're already doing it, but we'd like to make sure that we know what we're doing.
Well, I guess
I know you want an answer that's
No,
clear.
I don't think you have an answer now, but I do think part of the value of this presentation is to try and simplify it down to the public. And because ultimately they're paying the bill for this, just to say, there are different strategies that we go ahead. We preserve existing housing. We want to invest, 30% of our assets in that. We want to have new family housing. We'd like to invest 30% in that. We'd like to have 30% in the middle. I don't know what it is, but I think the point I'm trying to get to is understand where you are, in a relatively simplified explanation that requires all this to get there, but at least says this is what we're about.
Very helpful. And I'll tell you, my gut is we need to spend about 25 to 30% on preservation and sometimes that is coupled with production, and then the balance on production.
Well, that's fine. I'm just.
But yes, I hear that's your charge back to us.
Just to be clear about it, and you make the call. I'm not trying to make that.
Yeah.
Okay, Councilor Kalis.
So on the affordable family housing that's so important. We've talked about preserving houses, affordable houses on this committee for probably last year and a half, 2 years. I'm wondering if you've been watching and if you think we're making any progress. I'm looking to, are we going down the right direction? Are we not? We tried with the 60% facade ratio to impact that, but do you have other input that we should be hearing? And it might be out of this committee, or at a different time, but I'd love more of your perspective.
Yeah, and I think that'd be a good conversation to have. I'd like to do that. I think in general, that produces this middle market housing more than deeply affordable. And they're both really important, and that it tends to be a little bit more incremental.
So you give us a date.
So, yeah, but I mean, I think that, if we could schedule a conversation to talk further about it, I think that'd be good.
Laura would like to say
Can I just ask one clarifying question? I know we're talking about that deeply affordable family housing, and then on that last slide, you mentioned the middle income, 150 to 210, that's also missing. Can you just clarify where those are coming in terms of inclusionary zoning, 40B, and?
It's not, and it's not covered at all in this report.
Right.
I think that that's a conversation that this community has had a lot over the past couple of years. That people are really feeling like they want it. And so one of my recommendations is, if that's a priority for this committee, if that's a priority for you all with your constituents, that's worth some study. It's an entirely different solution. It doesn't have the sort of governmental subsidy that affordable housing can tap into. So that's a hard solution.
Council Maliki.
About expiring use, okay, so taking the example of Adams Park and upcoming happens at Cabot Park Village. When those units expire, what happens to people in?
Oh, I was hoping nobody was gonna ask, because I have on my list of things to do a little research. I think, this is a guess, I'm sure there's somebody online. I see somebody online who could answer that question, but here is, I think, that person's lease runs out, and then the rent goes to market.
So they either have to pay the higher rent or move out.
That's right.
And has that actually happened?
It certainly has happened some places.
One other question.
I don't know that it's happened in Newton. I don't know but that's the general notion. That's the problem. We lose that affordable. And our SHI, our affordable units go down. So we are further from fair.
Getting leverage, right?
Yeah.
And also, I was under the impression that one of the leverages is that plural, that we have, and maybe it depends on the original project's approval, was that if units expire, then they are out of compliance with zoning, that they were allowed to do by doing the affordable units in the first place.
Oh, you are way out of my
That's
expertise.
like, I think, a law question, and it would maybe depend on.
Yeah, that would be a,
Original property, because in some cases, I think long ago, Boston stuff, the expiring use was because they got a loan for 40 years, and then they didn't have to do it, so it was kind of in the bank. But if the city has granted permission to do or create a certain number of units on a certain amount of land, on the condition that X% be affordable.
I think it's affordable during the term.
Answer that to some degree. I will double check with law, but I believe that it would be in the zoning ordinance, the duration of affordable or requirements, so that they couldn't fall out of compliance if they fulfilled that duration.
But I don't think ROC has never had anything about duration in it.
No, but on the individual
It's in-
special permit or whatever, right?
Especially on our inclusion
Now
of
it's in
zoning.
perpetuity. So in the past, it could have.
Was it ever not though?
Yes, it
Yes,
was,
oh,
yes.
yeah. Anybody else on this subject? Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks for the presentation. And one of the things you mentioned briefly was units that are provided for people with special needs or mobility needs. Is there a way, I think I didn't quite see it here, but is there a way that we could tease out exactly an understanding of across those 2,100 or so units, how accessible units are fitting into the income tiers across the city, and understand also where those are. I mean, I think we saw an email this week that was like troubling around this topic, and I would like to just begin to feel like I've got a better sense and kind of wrap my head around it, what our options are.
You might have seen Esther and I exchange a glance. One of the things that we were not able to do is just beyond our capacity was to actually look at accessible units. and understand where our accessible units are. And so that's a piece that could benefit from further study. We don't actually, we know new construction places are really in compliance. We know the housing authority really struggles because their stock is old. Esther, anything more on that? You dealt with this much longer than I.
Well, Judy Fairley,
Yes.
who is recently retired, she actually offered at the last meeting of Caring for Housing to volunteer to help work on it. So a very generous offer, but a very important question.
But one of the things that Jeannie Fairley has said, because I've been to a lot of affordable housing, the accessible units, the people who really need it very low income, and a lot of times it's not, it might be an 80%. So someone who could physically use that unit, they can't get it because it's out of their range, and so they will, rent it to someone else. And that is another problem with that.
I'm sorry, I'm just on
Okay.
this issue. Is there any, and this may very be legal on this point, and maybe it's a good policy, but is there any reason that there is not an ability if somebody is in the disabled category who doesn't meet the income criteria, such deeper, whether there is some way of providing assistance? I know the Cousins Fund was talked about and there are other things, but it seems to me we ought to just leave those people out there if there's some mechanism. Now, it may not be your part, so to speak, but I'm curious if that's something we figure out, because it does seem to me that we're talking about subsidized housing and providing access to all segments of the community. It just seems to me that this is a segment of the community that deserves even more consideration. But because of the threshold, it may be that they're disabled, they can't earn any money, and they can't, so they're very low in income, and the unit that they can occupy is targeted for somebody else.
And perhaps conversely, the other problem too, right? If somebody is not very low income, but is in the 110 tier and disabled and still can't, and there isn't a unit that's available in that tier, can a unit be swapped? Can some funding be provided? How do we make up that balance?
And one of the real problems is a mismatch in accessible units and people who need them. So, often an accessible unit, when you have that unit available, you don't have someone who needs it. And when someone needs it, you don't have the unit. So just one note is that the accessibility requirements are not restricted to affordable units. All units have to meet the, Cyrus probably knows this better than I, 5% tier 1. And
Yeah, but I think what I'm kind of getting at is understanding across the city
that's right.
just what that breakdown is ending up as these projects happen.
And maybe it is like having a matching system, a system where in the same way that we now have a navigator for affordable units statewide, maybe we could have a database of accessible units in Newton and help mapping. I mean, that might be part of the support that you're
But these are all lottery units to begin with, too.
Right. Only affordable.
Yeah, and Councilor Roach.
On this topic, and since we're talking about priorities, I think that to the extent that the council adopts these priorities formally or informally, that accessibility be an addition, because and Cyrus and others know this much better, Councilor Damovet and others know this much better than I do, which is you can build making things accessible ready and makes it much cheaper to make them accessible after the fact. In a situation like the one we had, where there's a unit that's not necessarily accessible right now, but is accessible ready, the doorways are wide enough, there's backing for grab rails, et cetera, then, you know, we could step in and say, okay, here's a unit, we'll fund the conversion to fully accessible, and it's much less because we built it ahead of time, but in the.
And that's the only way we've built for, I don't know, 15, 20 years.
So all of the units that we build are now accessible ready,
Certainly the ones we did.
Yeah.
but we can make it a condition of special
Adaptable.
permits,
That's right, and it's
Yeah.
adaptable.
adaptable. So,
Special permits, stuff like that.
Yes, and I get the comment that the Northland has done this.
okay,
That they actually, you know, in terms of the destination units, that there's one building that's gonna have accessible ready units. And I think that that's where you touch the developer and you find out from them what they've created so that then you know what potential is there.
Can I just add that one totally unmet need, not accessibility is one aspect of it, but the number of adult children living at home with their parents over the age of 22 is huge, much larger than you would suspect. And adult. I think I left out the word disabled, adult disabled children living at home, because I have one of the other kind myself.
Yeah.
But, you know, the number of adult disabled children living at home with their parents is huge. And we do not study that, there's no research on it, we have no thoughts on how to meet that need. And I mean, that's worth putting on the table as something to be looked at and thought about.
well, and on that point, right, there's another category, right, of group homes for adults with disabilities that, you know, where does that fit into our prioritization?
That's the majority of the 14% supportive housing
Yes.
in this group.
No,
And-
no, but
And we actually have a disproportionate number because Newton parents have been, most of those group homes were developed by parents. And Newton's parents have been excellent about creating good housing options, but as their children are aging, a lot of times those group homes are not accessible, back to accessible. And so it's sort of a crisis within the group home industry across the state.
One other thing,
So, yeah.
when we did our tour of the different buildings, I found out at the police station, we were talking, and for some promotions for police officers, they have to live in Newton. And it's not required for the fire and things like that. So, you know, taking a look at that population, you know, would attract, you know, more police officers if there was something for them to live in Newton, because we have that requirement. Okay. Another topic? I have a few, once you guys are done.
Well, I was back to,
Pardon?
How late do you tend to run?
Oh, we'll get out before 10.
I
I'm a night owl.
I am also available to talk with people offline.
Vice Chair sleeps at a different time.
You and I.
Actually, I think the vice chair sleeps in a different dimension.
Yes, one thing, the numbers, and that you add the numbers in there, and we have like a homeless shelter, and that's part of it, but that's short term. And I almost think those type of should be pulled out separately. I mean, it could be
I can
counted, but
provide it separately. I was trying to distill the information, so
Yeah.
I'm happy to give you that, set those not count separate. There's also some, actually, housing for, people, victims of domestic
Yeah.
violence. And a
That's-
lot of that's long-term, permanent,
oh, that is permanent,
Yeah.
okay.
and only, and some of that is transitional.
But the transitional ones. I
Yeah,
think that-
I'll separate out and
Okay.
send that to you.
And I have, some of these I'll send you an email on questions.
That'd be great.
And let's see. So one of the things, I did a little bit of research, and this is with ownership. And do you know roughly how much for AMI for units increases every year? It does increase. No, it's the same number?
Oh, the dollar amount increases.
Yeah.
Because area median
Yeah.
income goes up.
Yeah.
But the percentage, the unit has to be sold at that 80% AMI. And so,
Which does go up some.
right, if we're in a, so here's a. You've got me like, past my bedtime, so I'm gonna give you the full answer. AMI, you're still restricted to say 80% AMI. That might have increased, that will have increased, hopefully. Sometimes it's gone down, but hopefully it will have increased. But the other factor in how much you can afford to spend is what's happening with interest rates. And so when interest rates were going down, people in affordable units actually develop a little more equity. And a lot of the studies we have right now were based on that. The minute interest rates climbed, the amount of equity you could take out dropped dramatically because you couldn't get the increased value of the house, and what could be mortgaged was so much less. So it's actually not, I have several studies, long-term studies I can share with you if you really want to look at them.
So I have a question. One of the concerns is some of these companies going out of business. Have they had in the past in the Boston area, some of these affordable housing groups? Because that was one of your concerns is.
I'm old. So I remember 92, and I remember 2007, 2008. So, and so they're economic cycles. And in a bad cycle, developers are often really crunched.
But have we seen it in Newton?
In Newton, I don't know. I actually don't think so, but I know that there are some owners who have been faced very difficult choices and have had to defer maintenance for a while.
Okay. One last question. Yes, property owners, yeah. One of the things you said, we have 201 vouchers here in Newton. That doesn't seem to be in the numbers. And if you're kind of doing affordable housing, couldn't that be part of another line item?
Yeah, so we actually tried very hard because vouchers come from a number of different places and from other communities, from the state. We tried very hard to get a count of how many. Those are on the operating side, and often a tenant, I'm a private tenant, I get a Section 8, I can go, you're renting a unit, and I can give you my Section 8, and that pays a lot of my rent. That makes it affordable for me. But this is looking at actually the units. This is looking at the units, it's not, so there are, and we wanted to test that, but we couldn't get the
A
numbers.
separate line item, a rough
Yeah.
idea.
We
have the numbers
can't,
that Newton provides.
we only
that
know
live
that
there.
Newton
Yeah.
Housing Authority
Yeah.
does.
Yeah.
But we don't know what Metropolitan Boston
Yeah.
Housing does, we don't know what Cambridge sends a lot of.
Just a phone call.
Being served on
We
Metro
did.
Housing.
Oh.
Let me tell you,
It's a
I
very
used,
small number,
Yeah.
very small, because the rents are so high.
well, it is restricted by our rent,
Well,
but
you said 201 are used in Newton,
that's right.
and out of the 2,000, that's 10%.
But those are used on different, hopefully, some of them are used on these units, but
affordable
often
units
they're
within
used in private housing, so that's a
Yeah.
great, that's a little bonus,
Yes, okay,
that's a little bonus.
okay. Any other questions? I'm done. I'll send my other ones.
You got one over your house.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So we touched on, many of the questions, accessibility, supportive housing being short-term. So a few more questions. One is, how does this relate to climate, if at all, in terms of that relationship of housing to climate?
Oh, well, there's a small topic. I think
We
first,
can take it offline. if you choose
yeah,
to.
yeah, I think it's worth talking. I think that there's a real nexus, particularly as we're investing in affordable housing in almost all new housing is very green, is very, we're building to passive house standards. When we build multifamily units, we use less land, we preserve more open space, more trees, all of those are climate friendly. And I think that because those are our big pressing issues for that we need to be talking more. And I think you've raised this issue really nicely. We need to be talking more about how do we address both together.
Second question is, I read this before the meeting and I thought, wow, the home ownership section is in there, but it's being damned by faint praise. I mean, it seems like if we're going to have priorities, at least what Chair Baker said, it doesn't seem to be a whole lot of bang for our buck.
I don't think we put money in home ownership.
All right.
I think we need to understand what we're trying to do before we even think about putting money in.
That is a level of clarity which is welcome. Thank you. And then there's no mention, unless I missed it, about zoning and cost of permit.
In the report, it's more clear in the written report. There is not cost of permit, and David Rockwell has just finished a study of cost mitigation fees that is a piece.
But I'm also thinking about the larger cost, which is the cost of time.
Right.
And the ability to get to the funding staff.
This study does not look at the cost to develop. What it does look at in terms of permitting is how absolutely critical 40B and inclusionary zoning and now by right development are in producing timely affordable housing. There's a great study that was reported on NPR last week about the difference between communities that can move quickly and that have a 2-year time horizon versus communities like almost everyone in Massachusetts, where it takes 5 years and that's almost all in permitting.
So the by right, that's good, nice clarity.
That's great.
And
we have our first by right development coming in.
super
Big one.
exciting.
Yeah.
And then we think about market rate housing as a regional issue. And this discussion has been about affordable housing within Newton. How do we think about affordable housing as a regional issue? Like, is that a lens? What's your take on it?
Well, I think Newton is just a microcosm of the region, and the region has a desperate need for affordable housing, and the state has actually quantified that. So I think that we are shouldering our part of being part of the region.
We are, or we should be?
We are trying to shoulder our portion.
Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And
Councilor Baker and I, it's past our bedtime.
But it's my time already.
Does someone want to make a motion?
CHST.
Well, to hold.
Oh, to hold this.
Okay, all in favor to hold, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Quick question, do we have a plan to update this either later in the year, later in the term? I'm just curious, as opposed to holding, like, would we redocket something later? I don't know the answer to my own question.
Okay.
My instinct is to hold this, because I think and we can ask them to come back again later
Fair enough.
in the year. I like to have that because it puts on the docket list on the new plan.
Can I ask a question?
I just wanna say, thank you so much. This was like really, really wonderful. Do you agree, Esther? It was really wonderful, and I appreciate an hour and a half. I would not have expected that. Thank you.
Only because we couldn't go longer.
I know, the pressure to close it up. Okay,
Well, you could go longer. Well, I think there'd be significant pushback.
I think the one thing that came up seemed very important to me, which was that we get a kind of regular sense of expiring use and understand sort of what's on, what's at risk in the year versus what's been sort of resolved. And then
docket something on that.
we're gonna document something on that. Great, all right, solves that.
okay, so I think we're finished and we're adjourned.
Oh, yeah, yes. On this last one, yes.
Yes, we earned it. Motion to hold.
Okay, you were
Okay, and motion to adjourn.
Yes.
Yes, and yes, and we're done at 9:33, 32.
Recording stopped.
Yeah.